Welcome back to the show, everyone. Craig and Jonah here today. We got a guest,
All right.
one of the dudes from our inner circle. Um, Finally couldn't contain his criticism anymore, and he had to come on and tell everybody what he really thinks. So, Midnight Philosopher, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us whatever information you want us to know, and then let's start talking.
Thank you for having me, Craig and Jonah. Yeah, I thought you both got marital debt really wrong, so I am here to correct you.
All right. I'm willing to be corrected on that. I mean, it's fire
I'm
away.
just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, for better or for worse, I'm pretty much on the same page as Craig and Jonah in many things. Possibly more of a borderline heretic or full-on heretic, but I'm unwilling to admit it because the church has been such a big part of my life, and to really like go against it would be like going against family, and it's it would be a different kind of pain to really go all the way. So I guess I'll ramble on for a bit, and feel free to push or pull me in a direction that you find useful. But
sounds good.
Yes, because I lack Craig's testicular fortitude to be here face to face. I'm using like some witchcraft technology to appear here as Midnight Philosopher, which is also my Twitter handle. And I like to say I'm using Twitter for productive purposes, but I'm mostly a degenerate on there, like the rest of humanity that chimes off on stuff like whether it's religion or politics. It's both therapeutic. It's like therapeutic to get your thoughts on a variety of topics on there, but it's not necessarily conducive to the life of virtue.
If you want feedback, you'll get feedback, but you can't say much about the quality or
yeah. I think if it's an exercise in humility for sure. When especially when you trigger some Thomist who starts citing some medieval texts that you can't keep up with, and you realize just you've jumped into the deep end intellectually.
Well, you can tell immediately because there's Latin in their profile.
Yeah.
So
there's that really popular phrase. I feel like Deus Vult is like on 99% of trad. Trad.
You want to look that up for us, or maybe Midnight's figured out what that is. I know God, but I don't know what the Volt is.
Was it God wills it or something like that? My Latin's horrible. I'm a second-rate Novus Ordo Catholic. I didn't quite make the cut to be trad.
I had to study Latin when I was in the seminary for a while, and a lot of good that did me because it's all gone.
Deus Vult is God wills it.
Oh, okay. All right.
God wills what? Like, okay.
It's true. It could will a lot of things.
I think maybe God wills whatever the trad wants God to will, so he's on their side.
That's pretty accurate.
Yeah. But yes, I'm Midnight Philosopher, and so I guess I'll start from the beginning and try to wind up to the point that I came across Uncharted Catholic Man's kosher, totally in line with the magisterium, podcast.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So I'm from the U.S., from the West Coast, and grew up in a Filipino Catholic family. So church has always been a big part from the get-go. Baptized as a kid, went to a pretty conservative Novus Ordo parish. It was very reverent. It was the reverent parish in the area, and I think a big reason for its success was that it hit a sweet spot between what we would consider trads now and your run-of-the-mill sort of hippie Novus Ordo, with all the light and the fluff and stuff. So that was my norm for like all of my formative years, well into undergrad. It was this Novus Ordo parish that everything was in the Novus Ordo format, but there were bits and pieces and hints of the old rite, like bells, communion rail, altar servers were only boys, lectors were only men. There were bits and pieces of Latin were incorporated, and throughout the years, I would say, with a newer generation of priests, more bits of Latin and kind of Gregorian chant. I wouldn't completely say it was. I don't think a purist would be happy. I think it was Gregorian-ish, but it was still a bit modern. But it was certainly incorporating a lot of that stuff. So that was my norm, and after a while, interestingly, I went to Catholic school for the first few years up until second grade, and I didn't know this because I was 8, so I didn't know why my parents chose to homeschool me. But I was cool with it. I was a pretty laid back kid. I think I was always good at following the instructions for most of my life, and it wasn't probably until my mid 20s to early 30s where I was like, whoa, I've been following instructions my whole life, but now it's starting to cost something. But
Mhm.
but yeah, I guess there was some controversy about how they were going to handle sex ed in Catholic schools back in, this would have been the late 90s. And I learned later that my parents were really concerned because they were actually going to start covering uh, same-sex attraction and AIDS, which I'm surprised that would happen in a Catholic school, but I guess they were going to start mentioning that stuff. So, I mean, the reasonable thing if you're from a pretty conservative Catholic family is pull your kids out because, and I would still agree with that. I think 8 or 9 to learn about, that area of complexity with sexuality is kind of risky. I don't know if kids are ready for that information. So, yeah, I don't know.
We have the kind of the controversy here where we've had people pull the kids out because they were going to teach theology of the body, which now I kind of have my reservations about, but it's for
Mhm.
total different reasons.
Yeah,
Glad
yeah,
to
for sure.
hear.
Mhm.
Hey,
Yeah,
before you go on,
for sure,
and
for
if
sure.
you can't answer this, don't. But like, how big is your family? Are you like, you have many siblings and stuff, or
So I'm an only child. I do
okay,
have someone that I refer to as my brother, but he's technically my cousin. But
okay,
he the short story is that he lost his parents when he was younger, and so
okay,
he was sort of bouncing around different cousins' houses, and he lived with me for 5 years. So I always refer to someone as my older brother, but technically he's my first
okay,
cousin. But yeah,
interesting.
I'm an only child. That wasn't by design. My parents got married a little bit later in life, and my
Hmm,
mom and my mom had some fertility issues. I think it was endometriosis and stuff
yeah,
like that. So after marriage, it actually took them 6 years to have me. So
wow,
yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, it was a big struggle. I know they wanted at least 2 or 3 kids. It didn't
mm-hmm,
happen,
mm-hmm.
and they got me. And hopefully I'm not a sore disappointment. But so far it's like I think I've managed to hide the worst parts.
Yeah.
They had one shot, so of all the pressures on me, I can't be that wayward. I can
It's a lot
only,
of weight,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. At least
Anyway,
worst case scenario, Craig, you have 9 chances to get this right.
yeah, one of them's got to turn out.
Yeah, you have good odds. At least one of them is gonna follow in Dad's noble footsteps.
But yeah, but someone was making a joke about it the other day. Maybe it was, I'm trying to think. Maybe it was in our Discord about how. Oh yeah, someone asked how we're raising our kids with the sex ed stuff and whether
Oh, that was
we're
me. Yeah, that was me.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Are we getting them ready to take over the podcast someday and be
Hmm.
the degenerates that we are? So
Yeah, my
Yeah.
kids aren't quite old enough yet to talk about that. So
Yeah.
Craig and I have talked about, how we should handle that. And
I don't know yet. I'm still figuring that
Yeah.
out. I got a few young kids yet to figure it out. Some of
Yeah.
the older ones are
Mhm.
I don't know. They are what they are.
Yeah, I think yeah the part that it didn't occur to me during Kevin's live stream to ask it. It sort of occurred to me later, but yeah, I think the main question would be like, how do you pass on a solid,
Mm.
reliable ethic without all the anxiety and scrupulosity? Um,
When I figure it out, I'll tell you.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah. But yeah, so that where were
You were back, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
You
the
started
homeschool.
homeschooling and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I did homeschooling for about 6 years, and that was I think that was definitely, I think it was a good call. I think it definitely developed certain. I think it certainly made my Catholicism in childhood very robust, and my parents didn't have to work too hard
Hmm.
to keep me in it. I think it was a matter of temperament and maybe environment, and there's a pretty nice homeschooling group, so that stuff was reinforced.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and aside from homeschooling, the homeschooling group, a few of us boys also did the Legionaries Conquest Boys Club, so we were kind of involved because the Legionaries of Christ had set up a local school, and even if we didn't attend the
Oh,
school,
wow.
they had a boys club. So sometimes it would be like I think twice a month, and it would usually start with a sort of 30-minute to 1 hour some kind of catechism talk and Q&A, and then sports afterwards and snacks.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think a pretty a robust conservative Catholic culture was reinforced, and it was really wholesome. I think it was there were some really good friendships formed there, and the parents were mutually supportive. So contrary to some people's misunderstandings of homeschooling, it certainly wasn't antisocial. It was, there was a really good network of homeschoolers in our church, and then families supported each other, and it was just an all around good. It was an all around really good good environment. And then like tying it back to sex for a bit in terms of sex ed, my sex ed was actually super direct in the sense my mom's a nurse, and so she explained everything to me really biologically. She even had the courtesy to warn me about things that I didn't really understand. For some reason, I'm such a late bloomer. Like I sometimes feel like so much of what people struggle with in their teens, I feel like it didn't hit me until my mid-20s. I'm not saying I'm like the patron saint of chastity or anything, but I wasn't a Saint Augustine either. I mean like pre-confession Saint Augustine. Yeah, I just well, I mean, part of it could be like, I was too shy and awkward to really get, not even first base with the girl, but I wasn't even in the game. So, I think being like an introverted musician type kind of helped me. I think I was chased by circumstance rather than,
I kind of think the same way. Yeah, I think I sort of accidentally managed to stay clear of the fray for quite a while. So
I have no comment.
We can't even see your animated version, and you still won't talk about it.
Yeah.
You know what it is? You know what it is? Jonah's not ashamed of, the only thing Jonah's hiding from is all his exes that might stumble across his videos.
Boy,
He's probably got a lot of exes that, they see his face and it'll just bring up a lot of this pent up rage, and they're going to start stalking you guys.
His theology of the body count is pretty high. So
no, not nice. And that's what blew me away. So like, my body count is pretty low, but compared to modern day, it's very low.
Yeah.
Like some of these things you see online, like I can't believe it. Like even when I was in college, like when I think about the people that I knew, we're just going to get off topic here, but the people that I knew that had been with a lot of people, it was like 20, and I thought, oh, that's gross, but today that's like a weekend.
Yeah, you got to boost those
numbers.
No,
you're right. But wait, Joe, technical question though, do other acts count as a body count, or do you have to hit a home run as a body?
Oh
for a
no,
body count?
I actually would count other acts as a body count.
Oh, okay.
I would totally would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, right. we have a Saint Augustine over here. Any kind of
well, I think it counts.
It's just anything.
He's not boasting it. He's just being honest.
Yeah.
He's not.
That's true. No, I know.
I'm not
he's not.
number.
Yeah, I know. I really respect that Jonah is not a scrupulous soul. But yeah, are we going to be Saint Augustine that body count is like, even if you feel a certain kind of tingle down there, that's already a body count.
Well, I don't know. Oh. Then we're involving Paris Hilton and Britney Spears and whoever else,
Oh man, yeah.
The models of the Sports Illustrated.
From 1993.
Yeah, we have to go teleology, right? The moment there's a little bit of an impulse down there, it must reach its conclusion, or else you frustrated the act, right?
Can't be too careful.
And sometimes it did with that swimsuit issue.
Alrighty, buddy. So we're back in your 20s. Before you hit your degenerate phase or whatever.
Yeah, So sex ed was so so I was actually about 14 when my mom gave me the talk, and it was very sober. It was so funny because she was really straight faced about it. I was a little giggly and awkward because I didn't really, who relishes talking about their private parts with their parents. It's just it's a very funky conversation to have. But kudos to my mom. Like, she was very sober about it, and just, there was no guilt, no anxiety. That was probably more self-imposed just because of how seriously I took the faith at the time. I'm not saying I don't take the faith seriously. It's just it's a bit of a rocky relationship after. Sorry.
Did she weave it in terms of like the morality of it, or was it more of a kind of a 101
like biologically?
This is what happens and stuff like that.
It was much more the second version. It was much more just a biological explanation. And so actually, even when as I developed a greater sense of self-confidence and started dating casually, honestly, like, it wasn't even fear of sin that kept me out of ladies' bedrooms. It was just I didn't want to get anyone pregnant. Because the one, for all the ups and downs I've had with some teachings, I think I've still I still find today like the church's teaching on abortion to be super compelling, and so uh, I wouldn't ever want to put, you know, I wouldn't put a woman in a situation where she had an unplanned pregnancy. So, you know, to sort of keep things in my pants was easy just thinking about that. I didn't even have to think about fear of mortal sin. I wasn't ready to be a dad. I don't want to put a woman in that situation where she has to even consider abortion. So I had that robust biological understanding, even before I understood the complexity of desire and all of that stuff.
That's what probably kept us out of trouble. I mean, you know, and a good thing too, because we're super fertile. So if we'd have crossed the
Yeah.
line once, it'd have
Mhm.
been game over. You have to get a
Yeah,
bigger wedding dress.
for sure.
No comment.
Yeah, but you know, this gets a little bit.
We found an area
into-
that Jonah won't talk about.
Well,
Yeah.
my mom can listen to this.
Mhm. Yeah,
That's true.
I mean, it's one thing to talk about it with your wife, you know, but you know.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
The only gun
Anyways.
control America needs is your pump action rifles that can't have deadly ammo, or rather, life giving ammo.
All right. Keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. So this kind of gets into like some funny aspects of sex ed that I don't think really get covered. But my mom even warned me about I don't know if you want me to use the full word, but I'll just say M.
The M-
She warned me about M and also
I was gonna ask
nocturnal
about that.
emissions.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
but she warned me about it before I would even understand. I think this was approaching my teen years, and she just kind of gave me the talk like, hey, you know, you're getting older, your parts are going to develop, and sometimes you're just, and this is, I think these are the exact words she used. Sometimes your parts are just going to discharge fluids, and it's going to feel like peeing, but it's not peeing, and you don't need to be afraid. That's your body just doing its thing. And for me, I just had no idea what that meant. And you know, I think at some point, like my body started doing what the body does, and then I started understanding, like, oh, well,
Yeah,
shoot, I
that's
just have to do extra laundry. This is a drag. And then yeah, in terms of M, uh, you guys aren't gonna believe this, but the first time I slipped up and finally did it, I was in my early 30s.
Wow.
We need to do a case study on you. We need your DNA.
It was, yeah. I mean, it's kind of and that's, you know, I'm not saying I'm a particularly virtuous man. It was just I really, as a kid, okay, this is also going to sound weird because I certainly slipped up quite a bit in my youth and stumbled onto pee without consciously wanting to, but I think this is weird. There's a misalignment between like the fantasy stuff and the curiosity stuff and the physical stuff, because I definitely started getting curious about pee, and I sort of stumbled on some stuff that I would you know file under softcore, because I wasn't intentionally looking up, you know, let's say fully uncovered beautiful ladies. It was you know, stuff that might be considered, you know, erotic or maybe other acts, and you know, I'll, you know, in the interest of modesty, I won't go into detail, but I certainly got curious. But for some reason, my innocent and pure and somewhat still untainted mind had no concept of what sexual tension was, and had no concept that it was something that had to be released or could be released. So I just sort of got like, yeah, I don't know, I just got comfortable with that you know, that sense of being excited, but not doing anything with my hands, you know, both hands on the keyboard at all times. And that just
we had to use
yeah.
magazines as kids. That's how old we are.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah,
Either
I mean,
way, your hands
yeah.
are busy. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, handcuffs to the handcuffs to the table. Yeah. So anyway, yeah,
Poor
sort of-
Jonah is anxious to ask you something, I think.
Well,
Sure. I mean, I'm
the-
happy to break it up.
So the solo activity didn't happen until you said 31?
Yeah, something about that, like early.
So, but
I don't
had
remember.
you had any other like experience before that?
Oh yeah,
And you
I
just,
had
like-
one. I had one. Let's just say a very unhealthy undergraduate fling that resulted in other acts. But surprisingly, after that thing, and I broke it off. I never went back to. I never, like, even though I had experienced something with that. It never occurred to me to do solo.
Man,
it's not because you didn't know what it was. Like it's not like you didn't know it was a thing. You just didn't.
Yeah,
go
I
down that
think
road.
Just
my mentality about it until my early 30s was just like, I've made it this far without doing it. I might as well not start. So yeah, it was.
Mhm.
It's kind of one of those things. It's a fluke. I'm certainly not a saint by any stretch. I think if Father Ripperger heard my story, he'd send an army of exorcists because I'm clearly under diabolical influence.
you're just master your domain.
Yeah.
That's impressive, man. I'll tell
we
you
were
that.
we were gonna do a
Mhm.
contest last November. You would have probably
A cruise.
you would have
Yeah,
been you would have got all the prize money.
Yeah, we
yeah.
had
I wish.
some circumstances that prevented the contest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just that, and
We were both on the DL, more or less.
yeah. So that was I don't know. Like it's kind of one of those things that I won a contest I didn't really even enter because I didn't understand the rules of the game. I think the first, like, I remember though my mom, the way my mom phrased it when I was a kid is that don't play with yourself and the church shouldn't play with yourself. And then in my head I was always just like, yeah, why would I want to play with myself?
Mhm.
That seems boring. And again, it's just I didn't make the connection about how the physiology works and releasing sexual tension and all that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand. I mean, I started to understand feelings of attraction and getting all the warm fuzzy tingles down there. It's just I guess I didn't understand teleology. I didn't know what that meant. I thought I was just supposed to feel that around a girl I found attractive, and that was it.
Mhm.
No touching, no whatever, just because I think I was raised with a pretty clear sense of boundaries, both in terms of not touching myself, but not inappropriately touching women, and which is, which is good. It's just standard politeness, and then, yeah.
The little college fling as you described it, was that did that go on for a while, or is that kind of a one-off or short-lived thing?
It was like a 6 month thing.
Okay, so
It was a
you
six
had
month thing.
enough.
It was,
Yeah.
yeah, enough.
Okay.
I'd say like the first 2 months of that, there was
Mhm.
nothing heavy or whatever, and
Mhm.
then it got into some other acts for a while. But then
Mhm.
yeah, it just like on a personal level, it just wasn't healthy. So
Okay. All right.
I made the exit, and then I
Mhm.
was pretty much like I steered clear for like another several years.
Hmm. All right.
I guess just a really brief. This won't take too long, but just after when I went into high school, because I went to I think by the time we got into high school level education, I think homeschooling wasn't viable just because I think I just would reach the point where I needed the help of teachers, especially with math and science. I think
Yeah.
that those were areas that are really tough to teach at home. So
Yeah.
so I went to Catholic high school, and which is it was reasonably Catholic, very Novus Ordo, but way too liberal for my conservative homeschooler taste. So I was really like the annoying ex-homeschooled kid that was a little too gung-ho in religion class, and correcting everybody for being too liberal, and preaching against premarital sex. And this would have been around the time that Barack Obama was towards my senior year. Obama was running, and Prop 8 was a thing in California, which is where I'm from. So gay marriage is on the table, and I think there was another one that was about kids can have abortions, or teens can have abortions without their parents, and all that stuff like that. And man, I was back then Father Ripperger would have been very proud of me, I think.
Yeah, John would. You
Mhm.
saw our episode. I assume you saw our
Yeah.
episode with our friend John, the annulment guy,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
he says for daily mass he can't make it to an FSSP, so he goes to a Novus Ordo to put your earplugs in, so he can't hear it, and he looks the other way so that he doesn't have to make eye contact with a priest. That was kind of how
Mhm.
you approached high school. I'm just here to get it over with, but don't interact with me and don't expose me to all your bad stuff.
Yeah, it was very much like that. I mean, I definitely had friends, but I feel like I got in my own way of really being close, and
Mhm.
no regrets. It was
Mhm.
it was what I had to do in my journey, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it just because it was part of it was just part of the thing. I certainly, if anything I regret, I just regret that was a poor representation of being
Yeah.
Catholic, because I'm sure some people found me to be too, it's probably how I feel about Father Ripperger is how people felt about me. Yeah, maybe the difference between high school midnight philosopher and Father Ripperger is I actually acknowledge that God was loving and merciful, and Father Ripperger never
Oh.
seems to do that. And also, I never really had an interest in demons and exorcism. That wasn't my thing.
So
But
you
in
were a
terms of
liberal
like,
already. Yeah.
yeah, I was. So I was, that we had the seeds of liberalism and neo Marxism planted. Yeah, there was the seeds of gender ideology and all of that stuff already planted. But yeah, I pretty much towed the party line, and I think by the end of high school, and I was into college, especially my first couple years, I really just felt this intense burnout. Like it just sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I'm man, faith really does seem like criticizing insufficient liturgies that are too liberal and in a hippie Novus Ordo format, and a really rigorous repressive sexual ethic. Like it really just dawned on me, like that's really all that I've
Those
been
are the two
stressed out
biggies.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just had this moment of like being really weighed down by it all, and it sort of hit me like after high school that that's really all that like Catholicism feels like. And it's certainly not appealing to any of my peers. And I'm not saying that my standard of truth and my standard of what the spiritual and religious journey should be is what my peers think, but I think it has to make you reflect that if it's not making sense to anybody in your peer group, and it's just putting them off, I mean, there's got to be some moment of like self-reflection, like why am I like so gung-ho about this? And I, a conversation for another day, but I also, yeah, that was probably like high school was my peak scrupulous years too. I mean, I still, comes back in and out, but I think I'd like to think I've developed a healthier mentality about it the last decade and a half. But yeah, that was like at my peak scrupulous years is also when I was just preaching about, the standard stuff. It was really about like, hey, we should be kneeling during consecration, and yeah, stop masturbating, you idiots. It was I wasn't the most pleasant guy, but I was towing the party line.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think by the time I made it to college and I sort of loosened up, and it wasn't that I stopped practicing. It was just like, I need to shut up and listen to what other people have to say, and be open to their experiences and learn about what cultures and religions they're from. And yeah, pretty much from there it kind of snowballed into, now I'm here with you guys.
Yeah.
It all started with a liberal university.
Yeah, a liberal Catholic university. Also.
I mean,
you know what? Those Jesuits will get you every time, man. They just...
I mean, it does show why I think traditionalism is so, I don't want to say uptight, but protective about the structure, because once you kind of relax a little bit, you do start to, there's sort of a domino effect that comes with that good, bad, or otherwise. In I don't, were you on Kevin's live chat last night with the guy that's a
Yeah, the was it Chad, the guy that was
yeah.
I caught bits and pieces of it because I was kind of doing some work at school, but I caught bits and pieces of it and then came back later for a rewatch that was no longer live. But
Yeah, I thought that one was really good, and you could see it happening. I mean, he went from being like an evangelical Christian to a Catholic to the first impasse, I think, was between him and the concept of evolution, and how crossing that line and saying, I guess I don't, those aren't in conflict with each other. I can accept the fact that evolution could be true in some respect. And then he said, and then it just suddenly all these other things.
It started with evolution.
Yeah, that was the sort of the first, because otherwise he was in that ultra, he never became full trad, but that really kind of Taylor Marshall, like all apologetic, everything. Like you're just either uptight, or once you let a crack in, you start, some people just, it creates an avalanche that they just can't, it can't really stop. So
the evolution thing just drives me nuts, because like to me it doesn't really matter. I mean, sure, I think evolution happened, but but
that stuff doesn't keep me up at night.
no, it does not affect my faith one way or the other.
This is the stuff that's
yeah, same. I never struggled with evolution, because I guess from back then and even now, I feel like those are two different languages. I think like science and evolution just is explaining the mechanics of creation, but it doesn't really conflict, because faith is much more about the why we live, and kind of the search for deeper meaning. So I never see, I personally don't see them at conflict with one another.
I agree.
And it, again, it's one of those things, like, I mean, it doesn't really impact my day-to-day life whether there's an orangutan in the family tree or not. I mean,
Yeah,
it
for
is what
sure.
it is. This stuff
Yeah, it's like,
affects my
oh,
daily
yeah,
life.
yeah, we,
Bonobos,
you
they
know,
did it.
exactly. You know, I maybe for us degenerates here, that like the big benefit of maybe believing in evolution is it explains a lot of strange human sexual behaviors. That's really the only thing, you know. We have more reasons than just concupiscence to explain why humans are so colorful in their sexuality.
That's true.
I'm very much open to that. I mean, it does seem somewhat more plausible than Adam and Eve just propagated by, I don't know, mental
Yeah,
duplication, and everything else that we have is just because they sinned against God. That's,
yeah, you know,
I don't know.
it is funny, you know, in St. Augustine's fantasy world, it's like before the fall, you know, Adam and Eve just had a nice chat under the fig tree, and they're, you know what, it's about time. We need a few more people here. So why don't we, you know, 7:30 p.m. tonight, let's do the deed,
Yeah,
do the deed, plant the seed, have another
yeah,
human, and then, yeah, no passion, no
yeah.
attraction, no enjoyment, just transactional, like, hey, we gotta do this for the one and only, our Lord and our God.
And that whole thing isn't all that unappealing. I mean, it would sure make my life easier if it was all very transactional and we didn't have to.
But
Yeah,
it would never happen if you
100%.
had to talk about it. Like, I mean, if there wasn't this like desire to do that, you would never have kids because of monetary reasons for the most part. I mean, sure, you might have one or two, but there's nobody gonna have 10 or 15.
No one's going to repeat that mistake. I mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good question about, like, could we function as a species without that primal drive for
No, this
I
species
would
survives
say,
on mistakes and
yeah,
bad decisions.
yeah, which is sounds terrible, but you're
That's
kind
true.
of right.
It's
Yeah, truer words have never been spoken.
I'll tell you what, the one thing the orangutans don't explain is why those Latin guys like to wear lace so much. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, I get that orangutans might explain our sexual urges, but like the lace, like.
Oh, well, Jonah, repressed homosexuality has to go somewhere.
I guess everything does express itself one way or another. But
Yeah, for sure.
some of those guys really get into the lace, and it's like, I mean, it's fine, but it doesn't really do much for me.
For sure. This obviously gets into
And they have to have
speculative
something in their
territory.
mouth, so they go to the cigars and stuff. Right?
Oof, yeah, and it's the cigar is a certain shape.
Yeah, it's phallic.
A certain shape of a certain appendage that takes on a certain shape in a certain situation.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it at that.
It gets pretty hot.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. When it's hot. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this definitely gets into speculative territory, and I want to say this as it's a topic it's sometimes difficult to be charitable in, but it is true. I mean, I've heard some variation of, like, a priest on the pulpit preaching against something is really confessing something that he's struggling with. And so sometimes I do feel that the people that are the priests that are most rabidly anti whatever it is that they're talking about, it's something that they've struggled in their journey towards the priesthood, or maybe they actively struggle against while they're still in the priesthood. Because I think it's easy to lose track of the fact that these are flesh and blood human beings in the priesthood, and they have things that they struggle with, and probably they fear the complexity of their own humanity, and I think they have to air out their own fears on the pulpit in the hopes that they're guiding the flock towards a better path. So,
and I don't think it's just them. I think it's any kind of I don't want to say Catholic personalities and stuff.
When you look at the televangelists, I mean, those guys get caught with prostitutes and whatever else in men's bathrooms.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just preachers, or Catholic priests.
Well, that's
sure.
just it. And actually, it's funny because I was telling Jonah before we got on the air, just last night, my wife was reading this book, and it's a collection of like stories by different kind of Catholic personalities, and I'm not going to mention the guy's name, even though it's in his book, or whatever. But let's say he's a well-known, polite Catholic podcaster. It was talking about mercy and forgiveness, and he was talking about how he was near the point of spiritual despair because he was going to confession for the sin that he just could not stop, and he went in there.
Did you write this part?
Well, so he's like, and I knew I was gonna go out of the confessional. It was gonna happen again. I said, I know exactly
Mhm.
what he's talking. We know what
Yeah.
sin he's talking about, right? She knew.
Yeah.
A year ago, my wife would have had no idea, but she knows. I said, I know exactly what he's talking about. So, and our priest actually, we have a new priest, similar story, talked about his thing in college. I don't think he said exactly
He
the
didn't say
same,
the sin at all, but
but connected all the dots
yeah,
and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So, yeah.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, kind of on a similar note, the priest at our parish that from whom I first learned about Father Ripperger, because I would call him, I'd call him Father Ripperger Light. I might actually share one of his homilies on the group chat just for reference. But he
Mm,
really nice guy, on a personal level,
hmm,
really nice guy. Very especially he's been very good to my parents, especially when my dad was kind of approaching kind of the end. I think that priest was always there supporting my dad towards the end, which I really appreciate. But
mhm,
yeah, very much a Saint Augustine type. I think he was in tech, and he had a wild lifestyle, had a live-in girlfriend, and at some point he had a come to Jesus moment, became a late vocation priest, and is one of the most outspoken against anything against the sixth and ninth commandment, and quoting Father Ripperger, and really into the whole binding prayers and exorcism thing. He's not an official exorcist, but he's sort of trying to self-educate, just kind of about stuff along the lines of Father Ripperger. Although this priest mentions God's mercy like 10 times more than Father Ripperger does. So there's at least a little glimmer of hope there. But
mhm.
very stern and austere, and kind of there's a bit of that. He's pretty soft spoken, but there's definitely some fire and brimstone with regards to the sixth and the ninth commandment in his stuff, which makes sense given his past. Very much a Saint Augustine type story.
Yeah, I mean, I see that in so many of the people that talk about these things, and I don't know. And I'm not even saying they're wrong. Like, I get why they're wrong, and I know that eternity is a long time and this life is a short thing. Like, I get all that. We just, I guess we just approach it a little more practical than that. I just think that, I think for every one of those folks who's sort of a recovering dude like that,
Mhm.
that now is sort of on the straight and narrow, I think number one, I think there's a great number of people that never ever really reach that level. They're still the poor guy going into the confessional like the rest of us. But I also think it creates a very fragile environment, because it only takes one slip up, one your orangutan roots rising up to like
Mhm.
shatter all that. Like, I mean, these guys, they're like, they're convinced the Lord has healed me of this, and I'm never going back to it. Well, okay, well, next time your wife has a baby and you're on the lam for months at a time, and you just, if something breaks, that can shatter your whole worldview.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think that your point about practicality is very, very important, especially like as even if all of these priests and bishops and popes who have commented in the last century about intimacy and family
Hmm.
planning, they have uh, giving them the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure everyone has good intentions.
Yeah.
I would hesitate to believe that any of these priests are intentionally trying to be repressive and stuff. But it
Yes.
is, I mean, to draw on my own background as a musician, it's sort of the difference between like someone who performs on stage, and then your music theorists and musicologists, that they spend
Hmm.
so much time analyzing the heck out of
Hmm.
music, but
Yeah.
they're kind of so separated from the world of actually just making sounds or listening to sounds and creating an enjoyable and meaningful experience in the moment when you're doing music. And I kind of feel there's a similar thing going on with theologians, that they're so divorced from the practical reality of what goes on in the dynamics between husband and wife, or between, even, between long-term partners in the secular world, if sacramental
Yeah.
marriage isn't really in
Yeah.
in the cards for them.
Mhm.
And all the and with being the father of 9, just all the balance between you and your spouse, but then also being there for your children, and all of these variables that, on paper, Christopher West stuff is super logical within the framework of the church, but it's logical and natural aren't always the same, or natural in the sense that it sort of arises from what feels spontaneous and sensible in the moment of being in that situation in the present day, in the middle of being a family of 9. And yeah, and being logical also doesn't necessarily mean sensible or moral, or I feel like sometimes there's this oversimplification of, oh, it's logical, so it's the only way to go. Kind of like what our friend Essential Catholic said, it's very left brain.
Well, I think it's something that it's a structure that you can follow and not really worry about that you're doing something wrong if you follow it. Like it's
Unless you're harming your marriage, which they don't take into account.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they don't, and that's not. So they're not seeing, the trees from the forest on that.
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of like the German tanks in World War II. They were built so precisely that any sort of bump would knock the gauges loose or like
Hmm.
make them inoperable. Whereas the American tanks were just kind of thrown together, and they could handle a lot more, stress and you know.
Yeah, does it work on the battlefield? I think is the
Yep,
Yeah.
question,
yep,
and I don't know that.
Yeah, I
exactly.
think that's a really good, the tank analogy is really good for the sexual ethic, but also for trad Catholicism as a whole, where you really need to protect that internal consistency. Like, as you know, I think I've repeatedly vented about Father Ripperger on our group chat, and I it's a mixture of, it's Lent, and I have that Catholic masochistic tendency where I just can't stop listening to him. I'm just insatiably curious. But yeah, it is, in the moment everything makes so much sense, but you really do have to make an effort to shelter yourself from outside information for that stuff to continue making sense. I mean, I think 99% of the world's population, Catholic and non-Catholic, are not paranoid about diabolical influence, and they're not neurotic about the various things that you discuss on this show. But you put yourself in a room with Father Ripperger fans, and it's like that's the only path, that's the only conception of reality that makes sense.
Yeah, the group of acceptable people gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and they'll always say, well, it doesn't matter if 99.9% of the world rejects it. If it's true, it's true. It reminds me of the story. The woman's at home, and she's listening to the radio, and she hears a police saying there's a car driving in the wrong direction out on the interstate.
Hmm.
Watch out for it. And she knows that her elderly father is out, and so she calls him up to warn him that, hey,
Hmm.
there's a car out there. I know you're out there. There's a car out there driving in the wrong direction. Be careful. You say, what do you talk about? They're all driving in the wrong direction, right?
Yeah.
And you just yeah, I mean, to be a trad is to say, well, yeah, anyone that disagrees with us is just in that lost circle, and I don't know, the bigger the other circle gets and the smaller our circle gets, at some point, and this is sort of what I keep coming back to, either that doesn't seem like a loving God, that the circle of those that are sort of saved is so small, or maybe the circle isn't supposed to be that small. Like, one of those seems like something's missing there.
Hmm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That was really well put. I think that is the thing I struggle with the trad approach, is that I think one thing the Novus Ordo has going for it, and I think was the intention of Vatican II, is like, and Jonah is a really good representative of this, is just to always focus on God's love and mercy. Um, because I don't really get that much from trads, at least from the the Census Fidelium YouTube channel. It's a lot of fire and brimstone and feeling inadequate, and God is more exacting than you can imagine, and you got to just learn to prefer suffering over pleasure, and it really sucks the joy out of life, but it also makes you feel like you have to suck the joy out of life because that's the only path.
And that's just like the Pharisees, right?
Yeah,
Like, I mean,
yeah,
that's the very same behavior that they had.
yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I enjoy listening to Father Ripperger as well. And
Mhm.
I don't know what to think about it sometimes, to be honest, but I struggle with all that too.
There was a guy, we were chatting with him off record about the guy that I stumbled upon yesterday, who has a podcast. Maybe we'll do a show with him at some point in time, but you know, he was saying that anytime I hear Father Ripperger, he's like 85% of it, I'm like, yes, that's exactly right. But he's like, there's always that 15%. I'm like, that shouldn't have been said,
Hmm.
or it shouldn't have been said that way.
Oh, that's wow, that's generous. I would put it like 15% of the time. I'm like, wow, Father Ripperger is actually making sense. I think those are practical tips for developing virtue. And the other 85%, I'm like, bro, have you been married before?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's obvious he has never been
Yeah.
with a
I think
woman.
the other thing too is the asymmetry of the, I don't know if asymmetry is the right word, but or maybe the strange proportion of the threat of hell. It really does feel like most of the time the threat of hell is employed to enforce correct sexual behavior and also like attending proper liturgies, because if I don't know if they're women on the altar, or they're using Eucharistic ministers, or they're standing during consecration, whatever Novus Ordo stuff is happening out there. It feels like the stuff that can land you in hell is the wrong type of liturgy or the wrong kind of sexual behavior. And then the other things are, yeah, they'll harp on other types of sins, but those are almost always more negotiable. But somehow sex and liturgy just, no, those are the no-go zones.
Well, it reminds me, and I'm gonna pick on my poor wife because she's not here to defend herself and doesn't listen. Um, but it reminds me a little bit of how she interacts with the kids. Like when the kids are like, let's say we're gonna go out to eat or something, and it inevitably, I mean, with 9 kids, like there's just a disaster waiting to happen, right?
Mhm.
And she'll lose it, and she'll say, "We are never ever going. We're never leaving the house again. Like we are just. That's it. We're not going to do anything ever again. No fun ever." Of course, she doesn't mean it, but there is just sort of that nuclear response to
Mhm.
every problem that designed to threaten them into what you want them to do now, but it just kind of
And the problem is the kids don't believe it over time either,
no.
which
Mhm.
is kind of like
Yeah,
how it is with
yeah, you
the
just
real.
kind of water it down so much. It's like either or if you enforce it, like it's either such a dark view of things that you like, there's no chance. Like I just lose hope. Like you either despair or you say, this is crazy. Like there's
Mhm.
no way that all this stuff is sending people to hell and people stop worrying about hell entirely. Like I don't it works until it doesn't work, I think.
Yeah, I think that's why I think a lot of it seems my impression is that a lot of ex-Catholics come from a more trad background, just because it really does, it corners you. It's either this or it's not.
Yeah, it's
Um,
hard to walk yourself back off that plank, I think.
yeah, for sure. I sometimes have this humorous thought to myself that I'm a big reason why I'm still Catholic is I was trad enough to be scrupulous, but not quite trad enough to be backed into a corner. And it's just the success of my church, that my childhood parish, is that it was trad enough just to give me all of the baggage, but not trad enough to push me off the plank.
Hmm.
It just hit that sweet spot. Um,
I think that's so true. And I see these guys, you see like the Taylor Marshalls and all that out there. Like I'm just like, you guys just keep getting further and further out on the edge there, and maybe you can hold it there, but one misstep and you're not, I don't think you're Catholic anymore. I think you're gonna go off in some total different direction.
Yeah, I
So
mhm.
mean, they will badmouth the Pope just like the Protestants do.
Yeah.
And so you're you're kind of forming an odd alliance.
Yeah,
And
I think someone had a really excellent meme about Taylor Marshall. Like, hey, come join the one true church, but our Pope sucks.
yeah. Well, and and it's so funny as I remember back when I was a trad, we were always told the schism is coming, but of course it's coming from
them.
the Vatican. Well, it was always, watch out for the Vatican too. Watch out, Novus Ordo. They're going to be, creating the schism, but
Yeah.
I think it's going to be in the opposite direction, right?
Yeah, I think so too. Or I mean, hopefully
Mhm.
not, but I
Hopefully
definitely
not.
feel
Maybe Taylor Marshall will be the Pope then of that new church.
maybe. I we'll go back to married clergy with starting with Taylor Marshall.
How ironic would that all be?
It's
Yeah.
funny, like one of the comments from our interview with Kevin on Tradicath was, why don't you guys just become like evangelicals or whatever? And the thing is that I have gone to evangelical services and other Christian, services like that, and it isn't the same. And they don't have the sacraments, they don't have the Eucharist or confession. Like, I don't want to. I love being Catholic, to be honest. I love the tradition and the prayers and the saints and the sacraments, and I just can't go without them.
Mhm.
But I feel like it's just best to wrestle with the issues that you wrestle with and keep moving forward.
I agree with you in the sense like I feel like and this isn't a shot against people who've decided to leave, but I think there's something to be said about wrestling for issues within the church. Like if we're gonna make the analogy that the church is a family, and mass is kind of like maybe the weekly family brunch that you go to. And
Mhm,
sometimes you have an uncle that gets up and makes a weird speech, and you don't quite
mhm.
agree with him, but you still love him because he's your uncle.
Yeah.
And you don't agree with all your cousins and all your family members, but there's still that sense of unity, and you're going to stick it out together as a family, and you're going to have the tough conversations. And I think there's something about kind of making noise and having a protest within the church, not because we want to destabilize the authority structures, but because these topics need to be addressed. And I think given the present day that we're in, and how fast information can travel, and how a couple hundred years ago the laity had no means to self-educate about various theological topics. I think I'm sure if you gave like the average church member a Baltimore Catechism exam like 200 years ago, I don't know if they could define things the way we can talk about transubstantiation, the nature of the Trinity, and have all of these definitions for what goes into the creed, and the various components of moral theology. I think in a way that the internet has in maybe created the rad trad faction of the church, just because we're all uh so capable of self-education, and whether you're more rad trad or sort of more concupiscent like us boys, I think it kind of emboldens the non-clergy to have these tougher conversations.
Well, and I think that I think really what the ultimate issue is that it comes down to how much are you okay with the messiness that we all see in ourselves, sort of being part of the entire church, including the magisterium and the popes and stuff like that, and the saints. Like, you start looking at, quotes of Saint Augustine and even Saint Thomas Aquinas, like amazing guys, but they were not without their foibles. And if you can sort of take off the rose-colored glasses and realize that maybe akin to what we were talking about, Father Rippinger, maybe they had, for every 15% they had right, they had 85% wrong, or vice versa. Like, they're not perfect. The Pope's not perfect. Pope Leo the 13th wasn't perfect. Like, pick your favorite Pope. Pick uh who was the celebrity bishop that was on TV back in
Oh, Fulton Sheen.
Fulton Sheen.
Mhm.
They I was just listening to someone yesterday, huge Fulton Sheen fan. They said he was an absolute bear to be around outside of that. Like,
Oh wow, that's kind of surprising. I wouldn't have
yeah,
expected. I grew up watching reruns on EWTN, so I was always a
yeah.
big Fulton
Mhm.
Sheen fan.
So I think if you can, I think the point of it is this: if you can allow yourself to accept the messiness and foibleness of humanity, even within the sort of the church hierarchy and the magisterium, without it sort of just completely deflating your faith, I think you can live with the struggle, and like you said, the family troubles. But I think for too many, they just are not willing to embrace that. And so either they stand by crazy statements of age-old saints to the death, or at some point they realize this is crazy, the whole thing must be wrong, and then they go off and they're no longer Christians at all or believers at all.
And then they just choose to ignore certain statements, like with Thomas Aquinas, like about how prostitution is reasonable and masturbation could be worse than rape. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the tough thing about having conversations like these, and why Jonah's off camera and I'm hiding behind whatever this monstrosity is the message from the hierarchy is often like, you agree with us or you can't participate in communion, or you're living in a state of mortal sin, or you're anathema. And so it makes there's probably got to be a lot of people in the pews that would hesitate to bring this up, and they kind of either they've reached a point, and I'm sure with especially with Novus Ordo Catholics, I feel like even if you don't teach them about primacy of conscience, I feel like primacy of conscience is intuitive for most average Joes who are not, who don't have as much of a trad leaning background as we have. That we're sort of well versed enough in the catechism and the tradition of the church that we there's this higher sense of accountability that we can't kind of tune things out the way some chilled out Novus Ordo brethren do. There's a lot of people that this is off the record and unofficial, but I think one of my cousins whose dad is a deacon, I think after kid number 3, he might have gotten the snip snip, and I don't think he had any qualms about that. They have 3 kids. They're able to really dote on those 3 kids and give them the best upbringing they possibly can. And there was no, and he's a more chilled out Novus Ordo type, and I don't think he had any qualms about making that private male fertility decision, if you can call it that. But yeah, I don't think any of the 3 of us would be comfortable doing that because of the nature of our background.
It's true.
Yeah, Jonah and I don't run into these guys in the confessional line, so they've and I'm pretty certain it's not that they're never dealing with any of these things. They just practically speaking, it is their conscience just isn't, it's not on their radar anymore, for better.
Yeah, because for them it's a matter of practicality. Like, they can't afford to have kids. They want to nourish and raise the kids that they already have, and marital intimacy still remains important. So for them, it's the common sense decision. Father so and so preaching about how NFP only, no condoms, no vasectomies, and all of that. It's just not really going to make sense. It's not going to connect with their reality. And high school midnight philosopher would have been like preaching fire and brimstone to these people. But now I'm just like, wow, I don't even want to tell them, because if I make them more accountable, then they have grave matter, full knowledge, and full consent. So I'm gonna compromise there.
I remember when I kind of left the trad circle and went back to Novus Ordo, and everyone that can went through this can relate to this. You walk into the Novus Ordo church, and you see all these families with 2 kids. You're like, man, look at all these people on birth control, and look at them go up to communion, like, and that's that's what goes through your mind, and I, not that there isn't some element of truth there, but I will say this: I'm willing to accept the fact that God kind of bludgeoned me with opportunities to be humble in my own personal life, to be like, you know what, I'm just not in a position to judge those people. I'm just not gonna, it's not my thing to worry about. I'll let God take care of that.
Yeah, I definitely feel you. Yeah, opportunities to be humble are definitely important, no matter where you are in your journey. I feel like I had a similar realization sometime in my early to mid 20s. I think when again, that's really late, but I think that's when I started to put 2 and 2 together about how physical stuff and emotional, like the physical components and emotional psychological components of sexuality sort of connected. And I'm like, oh, This is what it's all about. That's when it made me realize, like, wow, it's been so easy for me to, to preach against, gay people and the legalization of gay marriage, because I sort of was preaching from a place of, I still didn't understand, even as a straight dude, like I didn't really put two and two together about the depths and complexity of human desire. And it made me realize, like, I really didn't choose, my level of attraction to women and what I'm into in terms of my intimate life with my wife. I didn't choose that. It occurred naturally without provocation. And no matter how sheltered I was, my parents were certainly not allowing me to, see rated R movies and stuff. And even though, as a family we were all James Bond fans, pillow was put in front of my face anytime James Bond was, pulling the Playboy card, and it took me a while, there's still that instinct to close my eyes during passionate kissing scenes. It's not like that disappeared overnight. So it's like, they took every measure to shelter me from that stuff. So there was when I finally sort of understood sexual desire, there wasn't really much or any outside influence that sort of pushed me in the direction of being sexualized at a young age. And so I sort of had this realization, like, wow, I mean, these desires really are built in, and it must be the same for my gay friends. I need to shut up and stop being so judgmental and telling them that they just are concupiscent and they want pleasure and they're disordered and all of that stuff.
Well, okay. So since Jonah and I had to answer this question on Kevin's show, I guess I have to ask you now, what's your position on Catholic swingers?
Oh, wow. Spicy.
I'll link to
Amazing.
below. I'll link to the episode
Okay.
below for those that
Yeah,
are
for
what
sure.
that's all about.
Wow, that's amazing. Catholic
and they're infertile as well. We're only dealing with the infertile Catholic swingers, just to clarify.
Wow. And we're assuming that this is all consensual, right?
Apparently.
That's a good question. It's one thing. It's that my personal instincts are certainly, one man, one woman, monogamy. And I don't have the authority or the knowledge to comment about same-sex unions. It's just I have so much love and sympathy for people that experience people who are gay and lesbian and so on and so forth. I don't have the authority to comment on that. But as far as just like the heterosexual stuff, it's weird because I'm in a place where that's really not my thing, and I could see how it's like sort of excessively hedonistic, but it also doesn't strike me as something that's evil in the same way that, like, murder is evil or defrauding your workers of their wages is evil. I could certainly understand it as, like, hedonistic and excessive, kind of in a similar way where alcoholism and recreational drug use is, but it's not evil in the sense of unless you believe in some kind of metaphysical contamination that results from sexual activity. It's kind of uncomfortable, but I don't know if it's evil.
I think it's less problematic about the activity itself as it's going on, but to me it suggests that there's some like, it just isn't normal to share that with other people outside your marriage, and if you're either unaware of some unresolved issues going on or those are coming, like that, to me, that I think is the unsettling part. Is that's just not normal. That you just don't do that with other people, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it it cheapens if you're able to sort of give away the intimate experience with other people, or treat it as something kind of disposable or replaceable. I think it does call into question how much you value your spouse and the special bond that you have. If it's something that's replaceable with a different human being, that it does, it gets into some sketchy territory.
And I want to say, I'm sure people that have watched this show probably are under the impression that all we do is kind of get and kind of moan and complain about woe is me. I do want to, like, emphasize, like, it's I guess depending on where your marriage is at, it's not like, maybe it's the 15% that's really aggravating. Like being married to one person and using even NFP and being aware of, like, fertility, like, it's an amazing blessing. Like, I see these non-Catholic marriages where the men and the women have no idea anything at all about their natural cycles and where they're at and why this is happening. Like, I feel kind of bad for them. So I love the sort of the main structure of Catholic sexual ethics, but it's just like if we could just kind of fill in a couple of these pieces, or maybe switch the Rubik's cube just a little bit, I think it has a chance to excel. And rather than being a kind of a source of constant torment, I think it can be the greatest strength that we have as Catholics. I think it would
Mhm.
make a very compelling place for everyone if we could just figure a few of these things out a little better.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree. Yeah, I think I'd mentioned the somewhere in the group chat that I have some secular friends from, you know, non-religious background, and yeah, particularly one of my best friends. She kind of, I think, was dating someone that was at least nominally Catholic, and that just sort of led her into looking into some things about sexual ethics, and also just even just the sort of instruction that you know, I don't, I'm not a Protestant, so I can't cite the Bible without looking for the specific chapter and verse, but you know, the, you know, a man shall leave his
Mhm.
parents and cleave to his wife, and sort of that element of self-sacrifice. And she was very she felt that that was something missing in the culture, that, you know, she had just come across a lot of men that treated her as disposable, and she didn't feel respected, but she was really she had this sense of admiration for the ethos of self-sacrifice that's demanded in Catholic marriage. And also, she, for non-religious reasons, she didn't like chemicals, she didn't like all that stuff, so she
Mhm.
started using NFP. And I think she and a couple of her other friends have been tracking cycles, and I don't know what the heck they're doing, because I haven't studied that information thoroughly enough, but she says that, you know, 26 days out of the month they're able to enjoy themselves, and then the other whatever, then they have an abstinence period, and it's been working wonders for them, and they're not religious. I'm sure other acts are also on the menu, so
Other
um
acts or condoms, but I mean
yeah.
that's yeah. I mean, it can be attractive to a wide range of people. I think if we just and but but I would say sort of the TOB plus version, not the old traditional marital right. It's only about procreation thing. I don't like
Mm,
that's. I don't think that's attractive to
Mhm.
anyone at all. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm just hoping we can put the
yeah.
swinger thing to bed.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I think we're pushing the limits too far there.
Yeah, if you're a swinger or really any other Catholic, just go to confession. I think that's
That's a lot of chart. That's a lot of charting to like
yeah.
some weird algorithm. Like, okay,
Yeah.
You need quite an app.
yeah. Are you in your
But
luteal
like, isn't there
phase?
that
Are
thing
you
that
in your
if isn't there that thing that if women get closer, that their periods
yeah?
start to
All of us
line
have
up?
to
So
live together.
maybe they're all on the same chart in the long run.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, anything else that's on your mind or heart that because you know you've been in our group for a little while. We always really enjoy your input and anything
Oh,
else that you really wanted to get out there. This is your one chance of fame here until we bring you back
yeah.
again.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be back again. I think this is a good sort of like, at least, if I definitely feel like this is like the first course of a several course meal. If there's time and space, I'd love to hop back on. I think I was definitely a bit more shy about my own
Mhm.
personal experiences within marriage and stuff, and that's something I'd be happy to revisit at a later date. You know, if we sort of do a chapter two, and you know, as I get more comfortable in the online space, I could definitely offer some spicier takes. But I didn't want to scandalize you and your audience too soon. You know, I didn't want to risk our you know, blossoming bromance here.
We do have a sensitive following, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
Someone, yeah, this other guy the other day, I introduced it. He's like, "Yeah, I've heard of your show, and it's something about well regarded." And
yeah.
I'm like, "I don't think I
yeah,
know who you're talking
Yeah.
to."
yeah,
Hopefully Taylor Marshall said that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Taylor
yeah.
Marshall under a pseudonym is a secret
There's
Uncharted Catholic
there's
Man
a bunch of
fan.
closeted trads that are really actually in the comments liking our stuff, but they can't say anything.
Yeah,
We
and
do,
I
hey, you know, not to let the genie, and I'm not gonna say who, but
mhm.
we just kind of firmed up a interview in late April with a much larger traditionalist podcast that people will know about. So I'm kind of excited about that. But I don't want to say anything. It's kind of like my anxiety I have with intimacy. I just the baby's gonna
Yeah,
wake up or something. So until it happens, I'm not gonna say
yeah,
much more about it than that.
yeah. Well, to continue the intimacy analogy, maybe after this thing, it's like your channel will be impregnated and you will be fruitful and multiply followers.
Careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah, that's
Oh
true.
man, if this gets really big and you get like on you get blacklisted, nah, I'm just kidding. I don't mean to
I'm a little surprised. I mean, we do get the negative comments, and there was a traditionalist guy just yesterday was commenting on our videos and thought that we raised some interesting questions on this stuff, but thought that our humor was a bit much, and
People don't like the laughter. I don't know.
yeah, people don't like us laughing about some of this church teaching, I guess, if you
yeah.
ask certain people. And I'm just like, we don't mean to be disrespectful, and maybe sometimes we get carried away, but I don't know. If you want the bland, whatever, perfectly correct thing, there's plenty of other podcasts out there for you. But if you want just a little more real, kind of real flavor, this is it.
And there's actually very
Absolutely.
few negative comments.
Yeah.
Like they're a vast minority. So I think there's
Yeah.
people that enjoy at least thinking
Yeah,
about this stuff.
I think there really does need to be, conversation about this stuff within the church. I mean, I'm not invalidating the experiences of people that have left or are no longer part of the church. I'm sure that there's a lot of difficulty and hardship there. I don't want to dismiss that, but I think there's something to be said for staying within the church family and raising uncomfortable questions and maybe challenging dad's authority in as respectful way as possible, as possible, because I mean, I think Kevin was the one who pointed out, right, that so many of the things that we treat as infallible are not necessarily so. But I think there's very much a culture of like, just in case, it did come from the higher ups. We better not question it, just because, And I think we really do need to have a sense of everything's on the table. There's so much, and there are so many practical consequences.
There's just so much at stake
Mhm.
because if we could show that Catholic marriages were stronger than other marriages, that would really say something. And I think the more intimacy you have in your relationship, it's just going to be better. And those are, just real things that we can bring to the table.
I really do believe that the Catholic rough structure is so much more superior to the alternatives out there. Like
Mhm.
I really do believe that. Like I think there is something that people long for. If we
I
could
would
just
agree there. Despite all of my my discomforts with this or that,
Yeah.
more stuff that we could certainly get
Yeah,
into
next
in
time.
an episode 2 and stuff. But yeah, despite I think the model of self-sacrifice and self-giving and all of the the put others before you and stuff. I think there's so much in the Catholic ethos that does build set up a foundation for a strong human bond, even before getting to the sexual stuff. I think just the emotional and spiritual bond between spouses. I think there's so much in the Catholic tradition that sort of at least puts you facing the right direction before you start walking in that path.
And I think the permanency of it, does help, because I was just saying this to someone, like, I'm in the second decade of our, or I guess I'm in the third decade.
Oof.
We've passed 2 decades. Like we've really hit the sweet spot, I think, of our marriage, and a lot of
Mhm.
marriages unfortunately never get to this point. So
Mhm.
if you can hold it together, whether by choice or feeling of moral obligation, it does get better with time, but there's definitely some growing pains along the way.
For sure.
You know?
I think to sort of comment a little bit on the sexual side of things, I think pre-COVID, before I got exposed to rad trads and started rethinking a lot of things, my joke is always that, I've listened to hours of Christopher Hitchens and he never made me question God. I listened to 10 minutes of trads and like, what have I gotten myself into? And but like in my pre-COVID days, let's just say when I was very comfortable with primacy of conscience, more so than
Mhm.
I am, and I'd still say I'm pretty comfortable with it, but
Mm.
it's a little bit tougher to be comfortable with primacy of conscience when you've listened to a certain amount of Father Ripperger, and that's my own doing. That's entirely my fault. But yeah, I would say that what I sort of, when I was much more of a happy-go-lucky Novus Ordo Catholic, I think there was just this sense of, okay, even if we zoom out a little bit and don't obsess over the tiniest of details in the Catholic sexual ethic, I think there's very much something to be said that anytime you're engaging in intimacy, that you're that goal of, you're trying to cherish the whole person and you're not in it just for yourself. You're, yes, pleasure should hopefully be an afterthought, and it's part of the whole equation, but you're also there to give and to express this like wholesome cherishing of the other person. I think that
Yeah.
that whole underpinning of the Catholic sexual ethic, especially as articulated in Theology of the Body, is, even if we fuss about the details, I think that's something that it's so elevated above the sort of mainstream culture, I would say.
I think it was a huge step forward for both
Mhm.
Catholicism and, like you said, the culture. Like, I think there's
Mhm.
something powerful there, especially if we don't view it as the final chapter, but as, okay, now we've got something to work with.
Yeah,
What's the next chapter in the book? And
for
that's what
sure.
we hope to
Yeah.
be, and not just a footnote.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know that it's Uncharted Catholic Man, but if you somehow find a Muslim guest, that might be interesting, just because I think that they do allow other acts in the context of heterosexual marriage, and
Mhm.
they see it as a viable alternative for if the woman is having issues with the
Mhm.
full conjugal act for health reasons, or maybe just it's been after a pregnancy. So they're totally fine with it as long as it's between a married husband and wife. And I know that it's such a strange thing to say that, oh, why are Catholics comparing notes with Muslims? That's some sketchy philosophical and theological territory. But I think when you're evaluating any moral framework, I think you can't just be in a bubble. You have, I mean, can you not refer to other cultures and ask yourself, like,
Mhm.
did everyone else in the globe just get it wrong? Are they
Yeah.
all is
Yeah.
everybody else that's not Catholic
Yeah.
a complete and utter moral
Yeah.
degenerate?
Right.
Because I mean, I think we don't have to go into such lengthy discourse over why murder is wrong, why theft is
Mhm.
wrong, why even why adultery is
We
wrong.
largely agree on that stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
think, and
universal.
the vast majority of moral issues,
Mhm.
even if there are some gray areas, I think we mostly agree. But when it comes to intimacy and family planning, uh, you know, uh, I hope I'm not dragging this on too long for you boys, but
Nope.
No, this is
Nope.
great. I do have to get the kids to school though, so
okay. Maybe
um
I'll just, yeah, one thing I did want to bring up very briefly is actually Fulton Sheen, because he was I came across an interview of him, and he was basically asked, like, and this is probably the 70s, what will the church ever change on abortion and contraception and stuff? And his answer was peculiar, because his answer was, well, if we change, how would that make the church different from the world?
mm,
Which is, he didn't go into some lengthy Thomistic discourse, didn't go into teleology, but he said that, it was a matter of identity, that the church had to stay consistent on, abortion and contraception, because you know, the point is to be different from the world, which I thought was an interesting line of argument from him. And I think that colors the way that I see it now, that a lot of hanging on to this rigorous logic is also about, we have to be different from the world.
mhm.
um
Yeah,
and I think that is a mentality that I think deserves to be questioned.
amen. Well, we'll have to do this again. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure our viewers will too, so we'll definitely have to do this again. But
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I have too much fun with you boys.
all right. Well, we appreciate you coming on early morning like this. So thank you, Midnight Philosopher, for coming on. Thank you, Jonah.
You bet.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. And until next time, everyone,
Bye.
have a good one.